And when bubbles hyperinflate and extend, you get economic catastrophe following them. Third, at law, the element that distinguishes fraud from other forms of theft is deceit. Fraud is all about me creating trust in you, the victim, and then betraying that trust. As a result, there is no more effective acid against destroying trust than wide-scale fraud, especially by elites, and you don't get more elite than CEOs. Right? When you lose trust in economic markets, entire markets shut down. Give you an example. Everybody's been at a picnic or a conference where there were bottles of water given out. What if you knew that 1 bottle in 100 was contaminated? How many of us would be drinking those bottles? Long before fraud becomes endemic, it can shut down entire markets. Regulators have not shut down these financial markets. Bankers have. And they have because they no longer trust other bankers. And it's because they know what games they're playing, and they're afraid that their peers are doing just the same. The average chief financial officer in America lasts 3 years. Do you see why they're short-term in their perspective? Now add executive compensation to that, with massive bonuses if you hit the number. And the number is set quite high in terms of short-term counting profits. How long am I going to last as a CFO if I don't do these subprime loans and my rivals do during the expansion phase of the bubble? 1 quarter. Right? 1 reporting result, my CEO doesn't get his big bonus. Gone. We call this a Gresham's dynamic, in which bad ethics drives good ethics out of the marketplace. And that's how perverse things became. Think how many layers have to fail to have these kinds of epidemics that we've been discussing. First, all that corporate governance stuff that you read about, that has to fail. Well, that's pretty easy because the tone at the top, when the crook is at the top, is a fraud-friendly tone, something never discussed in corporate governance literature. Then there are external controls, right? That's the outside audit firm, the appraisers, right? That working very well for us? Is that new? Did they work well in Enron or WorldCom? No. They all had clean opinions. All of the savings and loan frauds had clean opinions, and they always came from top-tier audit firms. How about the rating agencies? That working real well from what we saw? No. These entities, you don't destroy external controls. You suborn them, and you turn them into your most valuable allies. How about, anybody hear the concept private market discipline? This is the essence of modern finance theory. And the economists that believed in it said that it was so wonderful, and I'm now essentially quoting, that a rule against fraud was not necessary or even particularly important. So we didn't even need rules. We didn't need the SEC. We didn't need laws. We didn't need prosecution. Markets simply stopped all frauds. But when there's a Gresham's dynamic, whether it's in China with infant formula or the United States with executive compensation, private market discipline becomes perverse, and it drives good practices out of the market. And so it isn't discipline, it's an incendiary. It's like an accelerant, if you think in arson terms, the gasoline you pour on the fire. And then, of course, there's regulation. Regulation also had to fail, and it can fail in any of 4 ways. There can be no regulation. There was essentially no regulation of most of the non-prime lenders. There can be deregulation. There can be desupervision. The rules stay in place, but you appoint leaders who don't believe in enforcing them. And so the classic one was the people who were supposed to be regulating IndyMac, where the chairman of the regulatory agency came to the press conference with a chainsaw, posed next to the 3 leading banking lobbyists with pruning shears, all posed over federal regulations to indicate their intention to cut through all federal regulation. Well, they succeeded in that mission, and you've seen the result. And of course, you can get capture as well, in which the regulators do the bidding of the industry, which I would say is largely what we have now. How sick does this end up? It ends up in producing these kinds of recurrent economic crises. And if any of you have been subjected to economics, and remember it, if you were ever told about Pareto optimality, which simply means that when the genius of a market is in voluntary transactions, normally both parties are made better off, right? I give up the 20 bucks and I get that really good tikka masala and I feel better off. The restaurant is better off as well. They'd rather have my 20 bucks than the tikka masala, right? That becomes perverse when you have these kind of control frauds. So in the typical non-prime loan from 2005 on, both parties to the transaction were made worse off. The borrower was made worse off. Indeed, there's been no greater destruction of working class wealth in American history than this crisis. 80% of the losses, according to the FBI, from mortgage fraud come when lender personnel are involved. In other words, control frauds, again. But the banks aren't made better off. That's why they're failing. So the party to the transaction, the bank, is made worse off simultaneously. Who gains? The agents, we call them, the CEOs, the loan officers that get bonuses for making bad loans, the accountants, the appraisers, those rating agencies. By the way, their profits skyrocketed by giving AAAs to stuff that was disastrous. And with that in mind, I will stop so that we have more time for you to ask questions. Thank you very much.
This is Bill's book here, and he was just showing me a telegram from Keating of the Keating 5 Savings and Loan that said, if we can't get Congress to stop black, then kill him dead. That's about as flagrant a threat that you get. It's actually a threat in writing. And I said to Bill, well, I said, surely Keating should have gone to jail for that. And he said, oh, no. His excuse was he was a lawyer writing to his lawyer, therefore it was privileged communication. Anything you want to add to that little anecdote?
Well, he did say it was his highest priority to get black, kill him dead. I think it's the nicest compliment you can get as a regulator.
So, given that you went through that experience and you actually put people in jail, and for some reason or other, you make this case where you use the word fraud, that's the sort of glue in your statement, really. And I don't see anybody even being indicted, let alone going to jail. So how come we have this massive fraud but no accountability?
Well, you don't have regulators right now that are quite the same, I think, as you had in our era. In addition to that, get black, kill him dead, Keating sued me in my individual capacity for $400 million. It gets hard to get a home loan when they say, what are your contingent liabilities? And you say, there's not enough space on the form to list them. He hired private detectives twice to investigate me, that we know of. They removed, our agency in Washington removed our jurisdiction over Lincoln Savings because we recommended he placed in receivership.
That was done through the Congress, right?
That was in response to the pressure by the